A young nurse saved a patient's life, never imagining it would lead to her dream job as a doctor. But as Emma Wright adjusted the IV drip in room 304, she wasn't thinking about dreams or futures. She was simply trying to survive another 12-hour shift at Mercy General Hospital with too many patients and too little sleep. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting shadows beneath her eyes that matched the ones growing in her heart. 26 years old, 3 years into her nursing career, and already the weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders like an invisible hand. The chronic understaffing, the overtime, the emotional toll of watching patients suffer despite her best efforts. Emma tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, her fingers trembling slightly from too much coffee and too little food. Her scrubs hung a bit looser than they had 6 months ago. The divorce had taken more than just her marriage. It had taken her appetite, her confidence, her sense of direction. "You need to eat something," Lisa, the charge nurse, said as she passed by with a stack of charts. "You're starting to look like one of the patients." Emma forced a smile. "I had a granola bar earlier." "A granola bar isn't lunch, Emma. Take care of yourself or you can't take care of them." But taking care of herself had fallen to the bottom of a very long list. Between the hospital shifts, the night classes she'd been taking toward a degree she was beginning to doubt she'd ever use, and the mountain of debt from her first failed attempt at medical school, self-care seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. Room 304 had been quiet all morning. John Chambers, 64, post-op cardiac patient, had been sleeping since Emma came on shift. His chart showed stable vitals, good surgical outcomes, no complications. A routine recovery case, until it wasn't. Emma was adjusting his IV when she noticed it, the slightest change in his breathing pattern. Most nurses would have missed it. But Emma had always had what her instructors called the intuition, that sixth sense that something wasn't right, even when the monitors said otherwise. She glanced at the cardiac monitor. Heart rate 72, blood pressure 118/76. Normal, but something felt off. Emma leaned closer, studying Mr. Chambers' face. The slight bluish tint around his lips, the barely perceptible strain in his breathing. Most would attribute it to post-surgical discomfort. Emma knew better. "Mr. Chambers?" She gently touched his shoulder. "Can you open your eyes for me?" His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His breathing seemed to require more effort now. Without hesitation, Emma pressed the call button. "I need a doctor in room 304, now." She grabbed the stethoscope from around her neck, listening to his chest. The subtle crackle in his lungs confirmed her suspicion. She checked his surgical dressing, clean, no signs of bleeding, but something was happening internally. "Doctor." Peterson arrived 3 minutes later, a young resident known more for his arrogance than his attentiveness. "What's the emergency?" he asked, not bothering to hide his irritation at being called. His breathing pattern changed. Emma explained. "There's crepitus in the lower lobes and I'm noticing early cyanosis around the lips." "Doctor." Peterson glanced at the monitor. "Vitals are stable. He's just recovering from surgery." "Something's wrong," Emma insisted, her voice firmer than she intended. "I think he might be developing a pulmonary embolism." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Based on what? A feeling?" His O2 sat is 94%. That's within normal range. It was 98% an hour ago. It's trending down despite supplemental oxygen. "Doctor," Peterson sighed. "Ms. Right, I have patients with actual emergencies." But Emma stood her ground. 3 years on this floor had taught her to trust her instincts. "Can we at least get a CT angiogram? Just to rule it out?" That's an expensive test to order on a hunch. Before he could finish, the cardiac monitor began to alarm. Mr. Chambers' oxygen saturation was plummeting, 92%, 88%, 84%, and his heart rate was climbing rapidly. What happened next was a blur of activity. The code team rushing in, Emma performing CPR while Dr. Peterson called for emergency medications. The frantic push to the radiology department for the very CT she had requested minutes earlier. The diagnosis, massive pulmonary embolism, just as Emma had suspected. A blood clot that had broken free, likely from his legs and traveled to his lungs. A silent killer that the standard post-op protocols had missed. Hours later, after emergency surgery to remove the clot, Emma sat at the nurse's station, her uniform still bearing the sweat stains from the resuscitation effort. Her charting was interrupted by a gentle voice. "Nurse Wright?" Emma looked up to see an older man in a tailored suit standing before her. Gray hair, kind eyes, an air of quiet authority. She didn't recognize him. Yes, I'm Dr. William Chambers, John's brother. He extended his hand. I'd like to thank you for saving my brother's life today. Emma took his hand, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her disheveled appearance. I was just doing my job, Doctor. Chambers. No, he said firmly. You were doing far more than your job. The surgical team told me what happened. How you noticed symptoms no one else caught. How you advocated for him when others dismissed your concerns. Emma shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have. No, they wouldn't have, he interrupted. And I should know. I've been practicing medicine for 40 years, and I've seen enough to recognize exceptional talent when I encounter it. He studied her face. You have the instincts of a physician, Ms. Right. The words pierced something deep within her, touching a dream she'd buried beneath layers of practicality and disappointment. She'd wanted to be a doctor once, had even started medical school before the combination of her mother's illness, mounting student loans, and a marriage to a man who hadn't believed in her capabilities had derailed those plans. Thank you, she said simply, not trusting herself to say more without her voice breaking. I'm the chief of medicine at Massachusetts General, Doctor, Chambers continued, and I'd like to give you my card. Emma looked at the embossed business card he placed on the counter. Confusion furrowed her brow. I don't understand. Call me when you're ready to discuss your future, he said with a small smile. I have a feeling it might involve medical school. A startled laugh escaped her. I'm a $30,000 debt away from even considering medical school again, Doctor. Chambers. There are scholarships, fellowships, programs for exceptional candidates. His eyes held hers. And apparently my brother has decided he'd like to establish one specifically for nurses pursuing medical degrees. Emma's heart stuttered in her chest. That's very generous, but think about it, he said. That's all I ask. My brother is alive because you saw what others missed. That kind of intuition coupled with formal medical training, he let the thought hang in the air between them. Just think about it. After he left, Emma sat motionless, the business card between her fingers feeling somehow heavier than its paperweight should allow. Dreams were dangerous things. They had sharp edges that cut when they shattered. She tucked the card into her pocket and returned to her charting, telling herself she would think about it later. But for the first time in months, a tiny spark had ignited somewhere in her chest, a feeling that might, if she dared to name it, resemble hope. Days turned into weeks. Mr. Chambers recovered slowly, each day growing stronger under Emma's watchful care. She found herself lingering in his room longer than her duties required, drawn by both concern for his recovery and the unexpected comfort of his company. You're hovering again, Nurse Wright, he said one afternoon, looking up from his crossword puzzle with amusement in his eyes. Just doing my rounds, Mr. Chambers, Emma replied, checking his vitals even though she'd checked them an hour ago. He set down his puzzle. Has my brother been bothering you? Your brother? Emma busied herself adjusting his pillows. I haven't seen him since that first day. But he gave you his card. Emma nodded, unable to deny it. And you haven't called him. It wasn't a question. Emma sighed, finally meeting his gaze. It's complicated. Explain complicated to the man who nearly died 2 weeks ago. Mr. Chambers said with a wry smile. Puts things in perspective. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting stripes of warm light across the hospital bed. Outside, autumn leaves danced in the October breeze. Emma found herself sinking into the chair beside his bed, suddenly tired of carrying the weight of abandoned dreams alone. I wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old, she began, surprising herself with the confession. My mom was a single parent, worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. She got sick when I was in college, cancer. I worked through my undergrad, got into medical school, but then life happened. Mr. Chambers finished for her. Life happened, she agreed. Mom needed more care. The medical bills piled up. I met someone who convinced me that nursing would be more practical, faster degree, good salary. I could help Mom sooner. And this someone? Ex-husband now, Emma said with a touch of bitterness. Turned out he wasn't interested in being married to someone with ambitions beyond supporting his. Mr. Chambers nodded, his eyes reflecting understanding beyond sympathy. And now? Now I have student debt, a tiny apartment I can barely afford, and a job that I love, but that sometimes feels like I'm standing at the edge of something greater but can't take the step. Because you're afraid of falling again, he said softly. The simple truth of it stung her eyes with unexpected tears. Yes, Mr. Chambers reached for his water glass, his movements still cautious after surgery. Emma automatically moved to help him, but he waved her away. "I was a business professor before I retired," he said after taking a sip. "Taught for 38 years at Boston University. Every semester I'd see students who were there because they truly wanted to be, and others who were there because someone else wanted it for them." He set down the glass carefully. The difference was always visible, not in their intelligence or even their grades, but in their eyes. The spark. He pointed a finger at her. "You have that spark when you talk about medicine. Even when you're checking my boring old vitals, I see it, but you're letting fear dim it." Emma looked down at her hands, seeing the small calluses from years of IVs and injections, the short, neat nails of a healthcare professional, hands that had saved lives, his life, hands that could do more if she let them. "My brother wasn't just being kind, you know," Mr. Chambers continued. "Will doesn't do charity. If he offered to help you, it's because he genuinely believes you have something special to offer medicine." "I'm 26, Emma said. "Starting over now would mean that you'd be 30 when you graduate," he interrupted. "And you'll be 30 anyway, whether you go back to school or not. The question is what you want to be doing at 30. The simplicity of his logic silenced her excuses. Outside the window, a red maple leaf detached from its branch, spiraling downward before being caught by a sudden upward draft, carried higher than it had been before. That night, Emma returned to her small apartment, the space echoing with a loneliness that had become so familiar she barely noticed it anymore. She kicked off her shoes, heated a frozen dinner, and ate while standing at the kitchen counter, scrolling mindlessly through her phone. And then, almost without conscious decision, she found herself reaching for her battered nursing school backpack, digging through an inner pocket until her fingers closed around a business card. "Dr. William Chambers, Chief of Medicine, Massachusetts General Hospital." For a long moment, she just stared at it, the embossed letters catching the dim light of her kitchen. Then she picked up her phone and, before fear could stop her, dialed the number. The Massachusetts General Hospital lobby was intimidating in its grandeur. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, the weight of medical history pressing down from every direction. Emma clutched her portfolio tighter, grateful she'd splurged on a new blazer for this meeting, even if it had strained her already tight budget. "Ms. Wright?" A professional-looking assistant approached. "Dr. Chambers will see you now." The office of the Chief of Medicine was surprisingly warm, bookshelves lined with medical texts but also works of philosophy and literature, large windows overlooking the Boston skyline, photographs of what must be family members scattered among academic awards. Dr. William Chambers rose from behind his desk when she entered, his handshake firm and welcoming. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Wright. Please have a seat." Emma perched on the edge of an elegant leather chair, her portfolio balanced on her knees. "Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Chambers." "William, please." He smiled, the expression softening the impressive authority of his position. "My brother is recovering well, by the way. Insists it's all thanks to you." "I'm glad to hear it," Emma said, genuine relief in her voice. "The surgical team did the hard part. The surgical team wouldn't have had a patient to save if you hadn't recognized what was happening?" He leaned forward, hands clasped on his desk. "Which brings us to why you're here. You've considered my suggestion?" Emma nodded, her heart pounding so loudly she wondered if he could hear it across the desk. "I have? And I've brought my transcripts, my original MCAT scores, they're 5 years old but still valid, and letters of recommendation from my nursing supervisors." She handed over the portfolio, watching anxiously as he flipped through its contents with a practiced eye. "Impressive MCAT?" he murmured. "And your undergraduate record is excellent. You completed 1 semester of medical school at University of Massachusetts?" "Yes," Emma confirmed, "before I had to withdraw." He nodded, continuing through the papers. Occasionally his eyebrows would rise slightly, or he would make a soft, sound that Emma couldn't interpret as either positive or negative. Finally, he closed the portfolio and looked up at her. "Ms. Wright, Emma, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your qualifications are impressive. Your experience as a nurse gives you insights many medical students lack. And what you did for my brother demonstrates an intuitive diagnostic ability that can't be taught." The but hung in the air between them. Emma braced herself. "However, Dr. Chambers continued, the path you're considering is not an easy one. Medical school is demanding under the best circumstances. For someone working full-time with existing student debt," he spread his hands. "I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't acknowledge the challenges." Emma's shoulders tensed. She had prepared for rejection, told herself it was the most likely outcome, but still, disappointment tasted bitter on her tongue. "I understand," she said, reaching for her portfolio. "Thank you for your time. I'm not finished, Doctor," Chambers said, his voice gentle but firm. He kept his hand on the portfolio. "I said it would be challenging. I didn't say impossible." He opened a drawer and withdrew a folder, placing it between them on the desk. "As I mentioned when we first met, my brother has expressed interest in establishing a scholarship for nurses pursuing medical degrees. In fact, he's quite insistent about it." He opened the folder, revealing documents with Massachusetts General Hospital letterhead. The John Chambers Nursing to Medicine Fellowship would cover full tuition at Harvard Medical School, plus a living stipend in exchange for a commitment to practice at MGH for 5 years after residency. Emma stared at the papers, unable to process what she was hearing. "Harvard? But I couldn't even get an interview at Harvard." "You would if the chief of medicine at its primary teaching hospital recommended you, Doctor," Chambers said matter-of-factly. "And if the fellowship specifically created for you required it?" "Created for me?" Emma echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My brother is quite determined, Doctor," Chambers said with a small smile, "and surprisingly stubborn for someone who nearly died. He believes, and I agree, that medicine needs more people like you, Emma. People who see the patient, not just the symptoms. Who trust their instincts and fight for what they know is right." He slid the folder toward her. "The fellowship would begin next fall, giving you time to complete your application and get your affairs in order. In the meantime, we could arrange for you to transfer to MGH as a nurse, perhaps in the cardiac unit to gain more specialized experience." Emma's hands trembled as she reached for the papers. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it, Doctor," Chambers replied. "Take the documents home. Review them carefully. Talk to people you trust. This is not a decision to make impulsively. And if I accept, then we welcome you to the MGH family and prepare for you to become doctor." "Right." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "My brother already refers to you that way, you know. Doctor. Wright saved my life," he tells everyone who visits him. Something warm and unfamiliar expanded in Emma's chest, a feeling so long absent she almost didn't recognize it. Pride, possibility, purpose. "Thank you," she said, knowing the words were inadequate for the opportunity being offered. "I will consider it, very carefully." As she left the imposing hospital building, the autumn sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the red brick of the surrounding buildings. Emma stood for a moment on the steps, the folder clutched against her chest like something precious and fragile. For the first time in years, the future stretched before her, not as a continuation of struggle and compromise, but as a path leading somewhere she actually wanted to go. The transition from Mercy General to Massachusetts General happened with surprising speed. Within 3 weeks, Emma found herself wearing new hospital ID badges, learning new systems, meeting new colleagues. The cardiac unit at MGH was world-renowned, intimidating in its excellence but also exhilarating in its possibilities. Her tiny apartment had been exchanged for an even smaller studio closer to the hospital, more expensive but worth it for the shorter commute. Her possessions, few to begin with, seemed even more sparse in the new space. But that was fine. Her life wasn't about things anymore. It was about transformation. John Chambers had been discharged but came in regularly for follow-up appointments. Each time he made a point of finding Emma, checking on her adjustment to MGH, asking about her Harvard application progress. "You look better," he told her during one such visit as they sat in the hospital cafeteria sharing coffee. "Less haunted." Emma smiled, recognizing the truth in his observation. The chronic exhaustion that had been her constant companion for years had begun to lift. She slept better, ate better, even started running again in the mornings, something she'd loved in college but abandoned during the tumultuous years that followed. "I feel better," she admitted, "though I'm terrified about the Harvard interview next week. Your brother has been helping me prepare, but Will is a softie beneath all that authority," John said with a chuckle. "Don't tell him I said so. Your secret's safe with me." Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, drawing warmth from the ceramic. "Can I ask you something personal, Mr. Chambers? After saving my life and accepting my meddling in yours, I think you've earned the right to call me John and to ask me anything." Emma smiled but then grew serious. When the embolism happened, do you remember anything?" John considered the question, his eyes growing distant. "You mean, did I see a white light? Have an out-of-body experience?" His tone was gently teasing. No, Emma shook her head. I mean, what was it like coming so close to the end and then getting a second chance? How did it change you? The question hung between them, more revealing of her own state of mind than she'd intended. John seemed to understand the deeper inquiry beneath her words. Before my surgery, he began slowly, I was existing, not living. My wife died 5 years ago, cancer like your mother. I went through the motions afterward, teaching my classes, attending faculty meetings, visiting my grandchildren, but I wasn't really there. He tapped his chest. In here I was just waiting, and after I woke up and learned what had happened, how close I'd come, how you'd recognized what others missed, I realized something. His eyes, clear and direct, met hers. We don't get to choose how much time we have, but we do get to choose what we do with it. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly. You're not just starting medical school, Emma. You're choosing to live the life you were meant for. That takes more courage than most people ever find. The words settled around her like a mantle, both weighty with responsibility and somehow lightening the burden she'd carried for so long, the belief that she had failed her younger self and her dreams. The Harvard Medical School interview came and went. Emma prepared meticulously, working with Dr. William Chambers to anticipate questions and rehearse answers. But in the actual moment, sitting before the panel of distinguished physicians and administrators, she found herself speaking not from rehearsed responses, but from the core of who she was and who she hoped to become. Why medicine now after establishing yourself in nursing? One interviewer asked. Emma thought of John Chambers, of the patients she'd cared for over the years, of the moments when she'd known what to do through some combination of training and intuition that she couldn't fully explain. Because every day as a nurse, I've seen both the miracle of what medicine can do and the gap between what patients need and what our current system provides. She answered, I want to bridge that gap. I believe my experience caring directly for patients gives me a perspective that will make me a better doctor, one who sees the whole person, not just the pathology. She paused, then added with quiet certainty, and because I've spent years helping others achieve wellness without giving myself permission to pursue my own path to fulfillment, I'm ready now. When the acceptance letter arrived 2 months later, Emma was changing IV bags for a post-surgical patient. Her phone buzzed with an email notification, but she finished her task before checking it, ensuring her patient was comfortable and pain-free. Only then, in a quiet corner of the nurse's station, did she open the message that would change her life forever. Dear Ms. Wright, we are pleased to offer you admission to Harvard Medical School as a John Chambers Nursing to Medicine Fellow. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. A passing colleague touched her shoulder with concern. Emma, are you okay? She nodded, unable to speak, holding up her phone with a trembling hand. The colleague, Sarah, a nurse who had become a friend in Emma's months at MGH, squinted at the screen, then let out a whoop that turned heads throughout the unit. She got in! Emma got into Harvard Med. What followed was a blur of congratulations, hugs from colleagues she barely knew, promises to celebrate properly after shift. Through it all, Emma felt strangely disconnected, as if watching herself from a distance. This smiling, crying woman surrounded by well-wishers couldn't possibly be the same person who, less than a year ago, had been going through the motions of a life she'd settled for rather than chosen. At the end of her shift, she found herself drawn not home to her empty apartment, but to the hospital chapel, a small, quiet space she'd passed many times but never entered. It wasn't about religion exactly. It was about needing a moment of stillness to absorb the magnitude of what was happening. The chapel was empty, lit only by a few electric candles casting soft shadows across simple wooden pews. Emma sat in the last row, her scrub still bearing the traces of her day's work. A small iodine stain on the sleeve, a wrinkle across the lap from hours of bending and reaching. Thank you, she whispered to the quiet room, to whatever force or fate or simple human kindness had led her here. I'll make it count. A sound at the door made her turn. John Chambers stood in the entrance, his frame silhouetted against the brighter hallway light. I hope I'm not intruding, he said. Will called me about your news. I was here for a follow-up and thought I might find you. Emma wiped her eyes, embarrassed to be caught in such an emotional moment. Not intruding at all. Please. He joined her in the pew, moving more easily now than he had in the months since his surgery. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the quiet of the chapel enveloping them. I never properly thanked you, Emma finally said. For the fellowship? Nonsense. It's the least I could do after— Not for the money, Emma interrupted gently. For believing I could do this? Before you and your brother came along, I'd stopped believing it myself. John nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes we need someone else to hold the light until we remember how to find our own way back to it. Is that from one of your business lectures? Emma asked with a small smile. No, he chuckled. That's from someone who spent 5 years in the dark after losing his wife, until a young nurse with extraordinary instincts gave him a second chance at life. He paused. And at living it. Emma felt the weight of his words, not a burden but a benediction. I'm scared, she admitted. What if I can't do it? What if I fail again? You won't, John said with such simple conviction that Emma almost believed him. But even if there are setbacks, and there will be because that's life, you won't be facing them alone this time. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box, offering it to her. A small token for your new beginning. Puzzled, Emma opened it to find a delicate silver pendant, a caduceus, the symbol of medicine, with a small diamond at its center. John, I can't accept this. You can and you will, he said firmly. It was my wife's. She was a pediatrician. One of the best I've ever known. His voice softened. She would have liked you, Emma. And she would have wanted someone with your heart to have this. Emma's fingers closed around the pendant, feeling its weight. The weight of legacy, of faith placed in her, of the responsibility that came with both the fellowship and this gift. I don't know how to thank you. Become the doctor you were meant to be, John said simply. That's all the thanks I need. Outside the chapel windows, winter was giving way to early spring, the first tender buds appearing on the trees lining the hospital grounds. Like those buds, Emma felt herself on the cusp of unfurling into something new, fragile still, but ready to grow toward the light. Harvard Medical School was everything Emma had imagined in her most ambitious dreams, and everything she had feared in her darkest moments of doubt. The pace was relentless, the material overwhelming, the competition fierce. Many of her classmates were younger, with fewer responsibilities and fresher memories of undergraduate science courses, but Emma had advantages they didn't: years of clinical experience, hands-on knowledge of patient care, and a network of support that grew stronger with each passing month. Dr. William Chambers became not just a mentor, but a champion, checking in regularly on her progress, arranging for additional clinical exposures that connected her classroom learning to real-world application. And John, fully recovered now, had somehow evolved from patient to friend to something like family. You look exhausted, he commented one Sunday afternoon as they walked through Boston Common, a rare day off from Emma's studies. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, gold and crimson against the green grass. Anatomy exam tomorrow, Emma admitted. I've been up since 5 studying the brachial plexus. Ah, the infamous first-year anatomy gauntlet, John nodded. Will says you're in the top quarter of your class. Emma raised an eyebrow. Your brother is sharing my grades with you? Don't look so shocked. We Chambers men have invested heavily in your success, John said with mock seriousness that couldn't hide his genuine pride. Besides, Will brags about you to everyone who will listen. His pet project proving that clinical experience creates better medical students. Is that all I am? An experiment in medical education? Emma teased, knowing it was far from true. John stopped walking, turning to face her with unexpected gravity. You know better than that, Emma. To Will, you're the future of medicine he wants to help shape. And to me, he paused, seeming to search for the right words. To me, you're the reason I'm still here to enjoy days like this. The weight of his words settled around them, neither awkward nor romantic, but profound in their simple truth. In saving John's life, Emma had somehow saved something in herself as well. The courage to reach for what she truly wanted, the permission to believe she deserved it. I wouldn't be here without you, she said softly. We helped each other. John corrected. That's how the best relationships work. They continued walking, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. John's grandchildren, Emma's formidable biochemistry professor, a book they'd both recently read. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of the peculiar bond they shared, forged in crisis and strengthened through mutual transformation. The years of medical school passed in a blur of exhaustion, exhilaration, and growth. Emma moved from the detached studying of first-year anatomy to the clinical rotations of the third year, where her previous nursing experience gave her a confidence that her peers often lacked. She knew how to talk to patients, how to work with nursing staff, how to navigate the complex ecosystem of a hospital. Right, you want to take this one, Doctor? Levine, her attending physician on the internal medicine rotation, nodded toward the newest admission, an elderly man with complicated diabetes and what appeared to be early signs of congestive heart failure. Yes, sir, Emma replied, already moving toward the patient's room with a calm efficiency that belied the butterflies that still sometimes fluttered in her stomach. 3 years into medical school, and she still occasionally felt like an imposter playing dress-up in her short white coat. The patient, Herbert Wilson, 78, looked up warily as she entered. Another one? How many doctors does it take to tell me I'm falling apart? Emma smiled, recognizing the fear beneath his gruffness. Just me for now, Mr. Wilson. I'm Emma Wright, third-year medical student. Mind if I ask you some questions and do a quick exam? You're older than the others, he observed shrewdly. Not straight out of college, are you? No, sir. I was a nurse before medical school. Something in his expression shifted. A nurse, huh? My Lucille was a nurse. 43 years at Boston Children's. She must have been remarkable, Emma said, genuinely impressed. May I? She gestured to his wrist, asking permission to take his pulse the old-fashioned way, even though the monitor beside him provided the data. He extended his arm. She passed last year. After 60 years together, Emma gently pressed her fingers to his radial pulse, counting while maintaining eye contact. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Wilson. Don't much see the point now, he said quietly. All these treatments, medications, for what? To sit alone in my apartment watching game shows? Emma completed her count, noting the irregular rhythm that confirmed the atrial fibrillation mentioned in his chart. But rather than immediately moving to the next clinical assessment, she pulled up a chair. Tell me about Lucille, she said. What would she think about you giving up? For the next 10 minutes, as Emma continued her examination, Herbert Wilson talked about his wife, her no-nonsense approach to his previous health issues, her belief in fighting for every day they could have together. By the time Dr. Levine arrived to check on Emma's progress, the patient's demeanor had shifted from resignation to grudging cooperation. Outside the room, Dr. Levine raised an eyebrow. You got more out of him in 15 minutes than the ER team got in 2 hours. How? Emma thought about her answer carefully. I listened between his words. His medical issues are real, but his grief is what's making them insurmountable for him, Dr. Levine studied her thoughtfully. Most third years are so focused on not missing a physical finding that they miss the person. You've got a gift, right? Don't lose it when you become an attending with 15 patients to see before noon. I don't intend to, sir. Chambers was right about you, he murmured, almost to himself. Then, more loudly, write up your assessment and plan. I want to hear your thinking on his heart failure management. As her final year of medical school approached, Emma faced the daunting process of residency applications. Her grades and clinical evaluations were excellent, but the competition for top internal medicine residencies was fierce. You should apply to our program, Doctor. William Chambers told her during one of their monthly mentoring sessions. MGH Internal Medicine would be lucky to have you. Emma's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. I've been thinking about that. But, Doctor, Chambers prompted, sensing her hesitation. But I'm also considering emergency medicine. Doctor? Chambers leaned back in his chair, surprise evident on his face. That's not what I expected. It surprised me too, Emma admitted. But during my ER rotation, I found something that felt right. The diagnostic challenges, the immediate interventions, the variety of cases. She paused. And the opportunity to be the first line for patients who might otherwise fall through the cracks. Like she almost had, went unspoken between them. Like she would have, without the intervention of the Chambers brothers. Emergency medicine is a demanding specialty. Doctor, Chambers said carefully. The hours, the stress, I know. Emma nodded. But it's also where I felt most alive. Where my nursing background and my medical training seemed to merge most effectively. Doctor? Chambers studied her face, seeming to search for something. Whatever he found made him smile slightly. You know, when I first offered to help you, I had certain expectations about your path. Internal medicine, perhaps a cardiology fellowship, following somewhat in my footsteps. I'm sorry if I've disappointed you, Emma began, but he held up a hand. On the contrary, he said, I'm proud that you found your own way, not just followed the path others might choose for you. That shows the kind of independence of thought that makes an excellent physician in any specialty. He reached for his tablet, typing briefly. As it happens, the MGH emergency medicine program is also excellent, and I believe they would be equally fortunate to have you. Match day, when medical students across the country simultaneously learn where they will complete their residencies, arrived with breathtaking speed. Emma stood in the Harvard Medical School auditorium, surrounded by classmates clutching sealed envelopes that contained their futures. John had insisted on coming with her, standing now at her side as she stared at the unopened envelope in her trembling hands. "Whatever it says," he said quietly, "remember how far you've come." Emma nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat. 4 years of medical school, countless nights of study, the transformation from who she had been to who she was becoming, all culminating in this moment. She tore open the envelope, unfolded the single sheet, and read the words that would define the next chapter of her life. Massachusetts General Hospital, Emergency Medicine. "I got it," she whispered, then louder. "I got it." "MGH Emergency Medicine?" John's embrace was warm and steady, an anchor in the storm of emotion that swept through her. Around them, her classmates were experiencing their own moments of joy, disappointment, or relief, each envelope containing not just a hospital name, but the next step in a lifelong journey. Later that evening, a small celebration gathered in Dr. William Chambers' elegant Beacon Hill home. Emma, John, Dr. Chambers, and a few key faculty members who had supported Emma's journey. The spring evening was mild, the windows open to admit the scent of flowering trees from the garden below. A toast. "Doctor," Chambers raised his glass, "to the soon-to-be doctor, Emma Wright, who will undoubtedly bring the same exceptional instincts and compassion to emergency medicine that she has shown throughout her studies." Glasses clinked, congratulations flowed, and Emma found herself at once overwhelmed by gratitude and strangely calm. The path ahead would be challenging. Emergency medicine residency was notoriously demanding, but for the first time in her adult life, she felt no doubt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the evening wound down, Emma stepped onto the small terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. The Boston skyline glittered before her, the lights of Massachusetts General visible in the distance, her past and her future together in one panoramic view. "Penny for your thoughts." John's voice came from behind her, followed by his familiar presence at her side. "Just taking it all in," Emma said softly. "4 years ago I was barely keeping my head above water. And now you're becoming the person you were always meant to be," John finished. "Though I'd argue you were already extraordinary when you spotted my embolism." Emma smiled, the memory no longer carrying the anxiety of that day, but instead the significance of the turning point it had represented. "We came into each other's lives at exactly the right moment, didn't we? Some might call it fate," John said. "I prefer to think of it as the universe occasionally getting things exactly right." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small package wrapped in silver paper. "One more gift. For this milestone. John, you've given me so much already. This one's different," he said, placing it in her hand. "Open it." Emma unwrapped the package to find a stethoscope case of buttery soft leather, her initials embossed in the corner. But what caught her breath was what was inside. Not a standard stethoscope, but one she recognized immediately as the Littman Cardiology 4, top of the line, in a deep burgundy color. "This is too much," she protested weakly, even as her fingers traced the beautiful instrument. "It's exactly right," John corrected. "The tool of your trade should reflect the excellence you bring to it." He took the stethoscope from the case, placing it in her hands with a ceremonial gravity that brought unexpected tears to Emma's eyes. "Dr. Emma Wright," he said softly, "every life you save with this, every patient you diagnose, every suffering you ease, remember that it all began because you trusted yourself enough to notice what others missed. Never lose that trust, no matter how much medical knowledge you acquire." Emma closed her fingers around the stethoscope, feeling its weight, the weight of responsibility, of privilege, of the journey still to come. "I promise," she whispered, and knew she would keep that promise through all the years ahead. 4 years later, Emma stood in the Massachusetts General Hospital Emergency Department, now wearing the long white coat of an attending physician. The burgundy stethoscope hung around her neck, slightly worn now from constant use, but still her most treasured possession. "Dr. Wright," the charge nurse called. "MVA coming in, 5 minutes out. Driver versus steering wheel, possible thoracic injuries." "I'll take it," Emma replied, already moving toward the trauma bay, checking that the necessary equipment was prepared. Around her, the organized chaos of the emergency department flowed with a rhythm she had come to love. The controlled urgency, the focused teamwork, the constant challenge of diagnosing and stabilizing the sickest patients in their moments of greatest need. As the paramedics burst through the ambulance bay doors with their patient, male, mid-30s, conscious but in obvious distress, Emma felt the familiar surge of adrenaline coupled with a calm clarity that had become her professional signature. "On my count?" she directed as they transferred the patient from stretcher to hospital bed. 1, 2, 3. For the next 30 minutes, Emma led her team through a methodical assessment and stabilization, identifying a pneumothorax, inserting a chest tube, ordering appropriate imaging, ensuring the patient remained hemodynamically stable throughout. Her movements were efficient, her instructions clear, her attention divided perfectly between the clinical tasks and the human being at the center of them. When the patient was finally stabilized and waiting transfer to the surgical floor, Emma stepped out of the trauma bay to update the family. The young woman who had been anxiously pacing the waiting area rushed toward her. "Doctor, right? How is he? Can I see him?" Emma gently guided her to a quieter corner. "Your husband is stable now. He has several broken ribs and a collapsed lung that we've re-expanded. The surgeons will need to repair some internal injuries, but his vital signs are good, and he's young and healthy. That works in his favor." The woman's face crumpled with relief and lingering fear. "He has to be okay. We have a baby on the way. He has to meet his daughter." Emma reached out, grasping the woman's hand firmly. "We're doing everything possible. And he's fighting hard." She paused, then added, "Would you like to see him briefly before he goes to surgery? It might help you both." The gratitude in the woman's eyes was answer enough. Emma escorted her to her husband's bedside, standing back as they shared a moment of connection amidst the medical equipment and beeping monitors, a reminder of why every procedure, every diagnosis, every intervention mattered beyond its clinical significance. Later, as her 12-hour shift came to an end, Emma completed her charting in the doctor's workroom, rubbing the tension from her neck as she finalized her notes. 4 years of residency followed by 2 years as an attending had taught her the importance of precision in documentation, but it remained her least favorite part of the job. "Doctor?" "Right," a voice called from the doorway. "You're still here?" Emma looked up to see Dr. William Chambers, now semi-retired but still a formidable presence at MGH. "Just finishing up." "What brings you to the ED, Doctor?" "Chambers? Slumming?" He smiled at their familiar banter. "Hardly. I came to remind you about the reception tonight. The new medical school scholarship program launch? You're still planning to attend, I hope." Emma grimaced. "I almost forgot. Yes, I'll be there. Just need to go home and change first." "Good. The donors are particularly interested in meeting you as our most successful scholarship recipient." "No pressure there," Emma muttered, saving her final note and logging out of the system. "Doctor," Chambers chuckled, "you save lives daily in one of the busiest trauma centers in New England. I think you can handle a few wealthy philanthropists." 4 hours later, Emma stood in the elegant ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel, wearing a simple black dress that she'd purchased specifically for hospital functions like this one. Around her, Boston's medical elite and philanthropic community mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, celebrating the launch of the expanded scholarship program that would allow more nurses and other healthcare workers to pursue medical degrees. "There she is." John's familiar voice reached her before she saw him approaching through the crowd. At 68, he remained remarkably vigorous, though his hair had silvered completely in the years since they'd met. The star of the evening. Emma accepted his kiss on the cheek with a smile. "Hardly. The donors writing the checks are the stars tonight." Speaking of which, John took her elbow gently, guiding her toward a small group near the windows. "There are some people very eager to meet you." As they approached, Emma recognized Dr. William Chambers among the group, but not the others, a distinguished-looking couple perhaps in their 60s, and a younger woman who bore a striking resemblance to them. "Ah, here she is." "Dr. Chambers said warmly. "Doctor." "Emma Wright, I'd like you to meet Robert and Margaret Chen and their daughter, Dr. Sophia Chen." Emma shook hands with each of them, noting the way they studied her with undisguised interest. "Dr. Wright," Robert Chen began, "we've heard so much about your remarkable journey. From nurse to emergency medicine physician, and I understand you're being considered for the assistant directorship of the emergency department?" Emma shot a surprised glance at William Chambers, who merely smiled enigmatically. That discussion had been preliminary, not public knowledge. There are several excellent candidates being considered, she said diplomatically. But yes, I've expressed interest in the position. Our daughter Sophia was a nurse for 6 years before deciding to pursue medical school, Margaret Chen explained. Your story has been inspirational to her. The younger woman smiled somewhat shyly. I'm just completing my prerequisites now, hoping to apply next year. And the Chens have generously endowed 5 new scholarships specifically for nurses entering medicine, William added. They asked particularly to meet you tonight. Understanding dawned on Emma. Her story, her journey, had rippled outward in ways she couldn't have imagined, inspiring not just this young woman, but potentially dozens more through the scholarships being created. It's an honor to meet all of you, she said sincerely. And Sophia, if you ever want to talk about the transition or the application process, I'd be happy to help. The conversation flowed easily from there. Questions about Emma's experience, Sophia's aspirations, the changing landscape of medical education. As they talked, Emma felt a strange doubling of perspective, seeing herself both as she was now, confident in her hard-earned expertise, and as she had been that day in room 304, trusting her instincts despite her uncertainty. Later, as the formal program began and speakers took to the podium to announce the new scholarship initiative, John leaned close to her ear. "Look around you," he murmured. "All of this grew from that moment when you noticed something wrong with a grumpy old professor's breathing." Emma's hand instinctively rose to touch the caduceus pendant she still wore beneath her dress for important occasions. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," she admitted. "That day feels both like yesterday and a lifetime ago." "That's how transformation works," John said. "It changes everything so completely that you can barely remember the before, yet the catalyst remains crystal clear." On the stage, William Chambers was now describing the impact of the original John Chambers Fellowship, how it had not only launched Emma's medical career, but had become a model for similar programs across the country. "And now," he continued, "I'd like to invite Dr. Emma Wright to share her perspective on the importance of creating pathways for experienced healthcare workers to advance their clinical education." A spotlight found Emma in the crowd, and applause surrounded her as she made her way to the stage. As she took her place at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, many strange, all united in their commitment to the future of medicine, she felt a moment of crystal clarity. This was why she had been saved from the life of quiet desperation she had been sliding toward. This was why John had survived his pulmonary embolism. This was why 2 brothers had taken a chance on a nurse who dreamed of becoming more. So that she could stand here now, a living bridge between what was and what could be, for patients, for students, for the medical profession itself. 7 years ago, she began, her voice steady and clear, I was a nurse working a 12-hour shift when I noticed something subtle but wrong with a patient's breathing. In the front row, John Chambers smiled up at her, his eyes bright with pride and something deeper, the knowledge that sometimes when we save others, we also save ourselves. And in the saving and being saved, we discover not just who we are, but who we were always meant to become.